Hi, here again to talk to you on this Friday the 13th. I thought it'd be pretty appropriate to read to you a selection from Dr. Nekros' Book 1 on this very special day. And should take about 10 minutes or so settle in if you'd like to listen to it. This selection is from a chapter called A Nightmare Realized. It's about 75% through the book when things are really starting to come to a head between Zeta and Micah. So, with no further ado. Took you long enough, Dr. Nekros spat out from his grizzled beard while pulling open the door to the silver Honda. Zeta Sutherland, his wife and sometimes partner, hopped out, tugged her pink coat around her, and groaned, "Does every greeting from you have to be hateful?" Trailing her to the back of her SUV, Dr. Nekros considered apologizing, but then decided he had more important issues pressing. "Did you bring them?" After lifting the hatch to the pilot, Zeta used both her hands to toss a plastic case Dr. Nekros' way. "Here, Micah, don't have a conniption." Dr. Nekros turned away and followed the edge of the dirt road back to the 1936 Packard. It was a cold, gray day, mere hours before nightfall. They were in the middle of nowhere, with the nearest town, population 175 people, 15 miles away. Had Zeta been without her GPS, she never would have found a forlorn path that had no business calling itself a road. As he passed the driver's side door of the Packard, it flew open and Dr. Nekros collided with it in an unfortunate manner. He dropped to a knee and struggled to catch his breath. "You infernal monstrosity," he wheezed through clenched teeth. "I thought we agreed to a truce." The Packard spewed forth a few short, antagonizing honks in reply to his longtime travel companion. Then, as Zeta trotted over to check on Dr. Nekros, it let out something akin to a whistle. "You can't be serious," Dr. Nekros grumbled as he rested the mangled right side of his face against the car. "You're showing off for my ex?" "Are you okay?" Zeta asked. "Fine," Dr. Nekros croaked. He took Zeta's outstretched hand and hoisted himself up. Pinning a plastic case between his left arm and his torso, he sucked in the frigid air in an attempt to drive out the pain throbbing through parts unmentionable. "You and the Packard still aren't getting along, eh?" she asked with a grin. She obviously enjoyed seeing Dr. Nekros in a position of discomfort. After all, he caused her much anguish long ago, especially in that last year preceding their divorce. "We've coexisted amiably enough until he decided you were the apple of his metaphorical eye," Dr. Nekros said before swallowing one last gulp of air. He then slammed the case down as hard as he could upon the Packard's rusted hood. "Oh, and it's Anton. You don't have to refer to him as the Packard anymore." Zeta heard a cheery honk as the car rocked from side to side. "It has a name?" "Yes," Dr. Nekros confirmed as he disengaged the case's latches, "and his name is Anton." "When did you find this out?" Zeta asked. "A few weeks ago. We had an interesting encounter with an old acquaintance of his." At the conclusion of his statement, Dr. Nekros felt his cheeks flare beneath his unkempt beard. Zeta squinted at him, adjusted her black-rimmed glasses as though incredulous, then asked, "Are you blushing?" Dr. Nekros couldn't begin to explain his encounter with Lillian, Anton's ghostly ex-lover. Moreover, he didn't want to. He didn't want to tell Zeta he'd been with a woman of sorts, only a matter of so many days ago. Furthermore, he certainly didn't want to admit that while in the midst of a devilish tryst, Zeta kept invading his thoughts. He didn't want to inform Zeta on any of these subjects, for that would force Dr. Nekros himself to further analyze them. "Look," Dr. Nekros hissed while examining the case, "his name is Anton, and he's a 1930s gangster currently possessing a Packard. All right? Can we just leave it at that for now?" "Wow. What's your problem?" Zeta mumbled. She patted the top of the Packard and said, "It's nice to meet you, Anton." The Packard released a deeply affectionate beep. Muttering an unidentifiable obscenity, Dr. Nekros opened the black case and pulled out a pair of night vision goggles. He started to put them on when Zeta grabbed his arm and yanked it down hard. "Putting those on in daylight is a great way to make sure you never see again, in the dark or otherwise." Dr. Nekros, feeling a bit stupid, huffed, "Oh, well." He next placed the goggles upon the hood and adjusted his black pea coat. This rendezvous proved one embarrassing moment after another, and Dr. Nekros did not take pleasure in looking the fool. He normally preyed upon other stupidity. The last few minutes were unfamiliar. Zeta gestured to the goggles and said, "You want to show me where you plan on using those?" Dr. Nekros pointed across a field full of prairie grass to a patch of large pine trees. "There's a shack in those trees," Dr. Nekros explained. The wind rose and cast her dark hair about, so Zeta pulled it back into a ponytail as she said, "Even on a day like this, there should still be enough light to see by. You don't need those goggles." "Of course not," Dr. Nekros responded. "Not for the shack. But according to your husband, your current husband, that is, there's a hole behind a wood stove in that shack that leads to a tunnel. This tunnel supposedly goes on for 1/4 of a mile. And in that tunnel? Jason didn't give you any details?" Zeta answered, "No. I was at a conference, and as soon as I got home, he said you needed help and sent me packing. Strange, to be honest." Dr. Nekros, who had been staring at the patch of trees, turned his head and frowned at his ex-wife. The jagged scars upon his face squirmed and jumped as he did so. Nonetheless, he said, "Your husband tells me locals swear they've seen a giant red man with horns entering and leaving that shack in the middle of the night. And you think it's the demon who slashed my face and tried to rip up my heart? Yes, I believe it's Zaphon. He's obviously been hiding all these years in that shack, terrified of the moment I'd catch up to him. Well, his worst fear will soon be realized." Zeta squinted at the trees and relived a certain nightmare of her own, one that involved Micah's throat sliced open by the demon Zaphon. She tried to dissuade Dr. Nekros by saying, "Wow, a red man with horns. That's very original." "You doubt your husband's credibility?" Dr. Nekros asked with clear contempt in his voice. He didn't like Zeta's tone and realized such a statement would put a stop to it. He was correct. Zeta loved her husband with all her heart and would never do or say anything against him. For the life of her, though, she couldn't fathom why Jason would give Micah legitimate information as to the whereabouts of Zaphon, especially without consulting her first. No matter. She felt sure Jason had his reasons, and she trusted him implicitly. She would just have to improvise. "So this is it, huh?" she exhaled. "You really think this is where Zaphon's been for the last 13 years? Dr. Nekros moved to the back of the Packard and unloaded the items his research told him would prove helpful in battle. They were not the typical items Hollywood would lead you to believe useful, such as a crucifix or holy water. No, his weapons included a vial full of a pregnant she-wolf's blood, a jar containing the skin of a two-headed water moccasin, a lump of coal marinated in olive oil for 7 years, and the incisors of a silver grizzly bear. "Do I really think this is where Zaphon's been hiding all these years?" Dr. Nekros repeated as he collected his gear. "I honestly don't know. However, your husband seems to think so. Considering I've never spoken with the man, I took his calls seriously." Zeta frowned at the conclusion of Dr. Nekros' statement. She asked, "Wait, Jason got in touch with you? He told me you called him." Dr. Nekros collected a few more items, including a flashlight, a shovel, and 2 walkie-talkies, before stuffing all of them, including the night vision goggles, into a bag. He next rubbed his bearded chin. At last, he said, "One of us is lying." Zeta huffed, looked at him as though he were a fool, and said, "No shit." Looking up into the gray sky, Dr. Nekros next asked, "Is he dishonest?" "Jason is the most truthful man I've ever met, Micah. I trust him not only with my life, but our kids' lives, too." Now giving her his full attention, Dr. Nekros grinned and said, "Whereas I, on the other hand..." Zeta finished his sentence with, "Oh, you are only dishonest when you're awake." "Sometimes during my sleeping hours as well," Dr. Nekros chuckled. "Oh, and for the last time, don't call me Micah." Zeta sighed while taking the walkie-talkie Dr. Nekros extended to her. He motioned with his head for her to follow, then told the Packard to stay put and guard the pilot. He only half joked, but the Packard seemed to take this assignment very seriously. As he and Zeta walked across the cold earth toward the patch of pine trees in the shack within, Dr. Nekros said, "I promise you, Jason contacted me concerning Zaphon's whereabouts. I realize you have no reason to believe me instead of your husband. I suggest we proceed as planned and wait for the truth to reveal itself, as well as Jason's purpose for lying." "It's more likely you lied." "Indubitably," Dr. Nekros agreed. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it.